Hello, Stephan here with Liquidity with a video on how Shakespeare's English compares to modern German. What are the similarities? Liquidity. English and German are closely related languages, even though they're not mutually comprehensible unless someone has some training. But there are quite a few similarities, especially when you see it spelled out. A lot of the words are very, very similar or even identical. Both languages are members of the West Germanic language group, and as part of that, of course, they're also members of the Germanic language group and therefore in the Indo-European language family as well. English in its earliest form has its origin with a Northern German dialect, which was the beginning of Anglo-Saxon or Old English. And this happened about 1500 years ago when the Angles and the Saxons and some other groups came over from northern Germany to the British Isles. Not surprisingly, the further one goes back in the history of the English language, the more similarities one can find between English and German. Even Shakespeare's English, which was spoken about 400 years ago, shares a few aspects with German that it does not share with contemporary English. I will share a few lines from two Shakespeare plays, Much Ado About Nothing and Othello, in both cases from the first act, a few aspects where early modern English is closer to contemporary German than it is to contemporary English. I will not use official German translations of the Shakespeare plays, but rather I will just translate those few lines into how somebody today in German would say the very same thing. How would we phrase that? What conjugations are we using? And what sentence structures are we using? Here's our first example. He hath an uncle in Messina. In German, we would say, hat einen Onkel hier in Messina. In English, of course, it would be, he has an uncle here in Messina. The early modern English and the contemporary English are almost identical with one little difference, and that is the ending of the verb have. In this case, we have hath in early modern English and has in contemporary English. And in German, we have hat. So we can see that the German conjugation and the early modern English conjugation of this verb are actually slightly more similar than they are between early modern English and contemporary English. At this point, it would be good to talk about the second person pronoun in English, early modern English, as well as in German. So in modern English, when I'm addressing another person or several other persons, I always use you. You can be used in familiar situations. It can also be used in formal situations. So it can be used if I talk to one person or several people. In German, if I'm on a first name basis, if I feel comfortable with somebody, if I talk to somebody who I don't have a certain distance to, I can use the word du if I'm talking to one person, or the word ihr if I'm talking to several people, two or more. If I'm using a formal voice, if I'm addressing somebody in a little bit more of a distance way and I use a last name to address that person, I would use the formal Sie for both singular and plural. Now, early modern English also uses you for three of those four situations. So for all the formal situations, early modern English uses you. That's actually the polite form in English that has survived today. And then for the informal situation, for the plural, you is also used. If I use the familiar second person, if I'm just talking to one person that I'm familiar to, I would use thou in early modern English, which is, of course, directly related to the German du. And the conjugations, the way I conjugate verbs with thou and du is different from the conjugations of the other situations. So the way I conjugate you in early modern English is different from the way I conjugate thou. Here's another example from Much Ado About Nothing, first act. But speak you this with a sad brow? So in German we would say, aber sagen Sie das mit betrübter Braue? Or in contemporary English we would say, but are you saying this with a sad brow? So in both early modern English and in German, we have a simple form of the verb to begin with, and we also start with that. We are not saying, we don't have a convoluted construction as in modern English, but are you saying? We just go straight to the verb. But speak you, aber sagen Sie. Here's another example from Much Ado About Nothing. Is it come to this? In German, we would translate that with ist es dazu gekommen? In modern English, we would translate that as has it come to that? Or did it come to that? So when it comes to the sentence structures of questions, early modern English very often is closer to contemporary German than it is to contemporary English. Okay, a few examples from Othello, also from the first act. Why, wherefore ask you this? So in English, we would just translate that as, why are you asking me this? In German, I could translate that as, warum? Wozu fragen Sie dies? Or das, probably more likely. So again, we see more similarities between the early modern sentence structure and contemporary German as with the sentence structures of early modern English and contemporary English. Another example from Othello. What sayest thou, noble heart? So in contemporary English, I could translate that as, what are you saying, noble heart? And I could translate that into German as, was sagst du, nobles Herz? So here we have the st conjugation ending in both early modern English and in German. As you can see, there are some similarities here. Okay, next example from Othello, Act 1. Thou hast heard me say, my daughter is not for thee. In modern English, we would just say, you have heard me say, my daughter is not for you. So we replace thee and thou with you, right? In German, I could translate that as, du hast mich hören sagen, meine Tochter ist nicht für dich. So again, we have here thou turning into du and thee turning into dich. So here we have the relationship between the familiar early modern English pronoun thou and thee and thy and so forth with the German equivalents, which are much more similar than they are with contemporary English. So although early modern English has a lot more in common with contemporary English than it does with German, there are a few areas, especially when it comes to verb conjugation and sentence structure, where German and early modern English have a few things in common, and where we can see how the languages are actually closely related and how they have common origins. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give this video a like And if you like these sorts of videos, if you like my playlists, if you like all the other videos on my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Have a great day. Tschüss. Bye.